Are you entering recovery from an addiction and considering using medical marijuana or cannabis? Or do you have a loved one that you care for who's entering into recovery from an addiction and they are considering using medical marijuana or cannabis? If you answered yes to either one of those, then you are in the right place and this is the right video for you. Hi friend, my name is Bernie from Tiger Resilience, where we offer addiction solutions for family members and friends who have a loved one who is struggling with an addiction. This also includes the person who is dealing with the addiction. So a very controversial topic that was passed along between myself and my partner, Dr. Jamie Redwing, regarding the use of cannabis in recovery. And she shared an article, and the title of the article was called Cali Sober, C-A-L-I, Sober. And it was about the California Sober model. And in reference to what that means simply is that using medical marijuana or cannabis in lieu of your specific substance of choice, if you're dealing with an addiction, will assist you in your journey in recovery. And it's a very controversial topic because there's a lot to discuss and a lot to break down here. On one hand, we have groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, to some degree, Narcotics Anonymous, that are abstinent only. In other words, you don't use anything. It's a clean slate recovery. So that means that you're not using any kind of substance at all. Okay. The argument there certainly is that, well, what are the success rates of programs like Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, sadly, they're about 5 to 10% are the success rates, but they're not much different than any other treatment program that we're working with right now that we deal with in the United States specifically. And a lot of that has to do with outdated and old treatment models. Again, I'm not inferring that we bring cannabis into this picture, but actually some of the techniques that are used and some of the actual practices that are utilized today in inpatient and residential settings. And I say that firsthand because I know, because my 26 plus years career working as a clinician and program director has been primarily in hospital and inpatient settings for the most part. So I do know a lot of the practices that are out there are still following some old models, and they're doing so mostly because there's a financial need for that. And what I mean by that is that there are programs that are compensated and or of course from an insurance standpoint, when money is used from states such as Medicaid systems and they're being compensated, including private insurance, Blue Cross is another one, for example, these insurance funders have very set priorities and principles when it comes to what they'll allow and not allow for treatment models. And because of that restriction and the inability for programs to be a little bit more intuitive and to be a little bit more creative in their treatment approach, they stay with these very strict models. And sadly, that does not yield any really great results today. And again, it does come down to the money, because a program can't survive if they can't make the fundings, and they need the funding in order to take care of their patients. So it's definitely a very challenging problem. But going to the bigger picture, so why is cannabis, introduced now as a treatment model? Well, there is definitely a pro group of medical marijuana and or legalization of cannabis that has been ongoing for a period of time and has been making a lot of headway. And I'm certain you've heard about this if you're not already dealing with these issues specifically yourself. And that is a result of a group pushing to have cannabis legalized. Now, just to preface where we stand here at Tiger Resilience, myself and our program, is we have no bias to either way. We don't believe necessarily it should be illegal. And there are some classifications of making this as a legal drug for those who are old enough to make informed decisions for themselves, no different than alcohol is right now, in a sense. So there is a lot of argument for that, and we don't necessarily believe it should be illegal from Tiger Resilience's mindset to this. But when regarding it as a treatment model, here's where we have an open discussion. So the key here is to understand that you're substituting one substance for another. And the argument is that you're not necessarily substituting one substance for another. You're helping a recovery person so that they're not using something as dangerous as maybe an opioid, a heroin, fentanyl, and they're doing this IV, intravenous, mainline. And that creates a risk factor of life. So if it was a choice and I had a person I'm working with and they said, I either have to do heroin or fentanyl and I'm an intravenous user, or I can just, use marijuana, and I have an option to give them A or B, well, of course I'm going to go take marijuana. Are you kidding? I do understand that that's not going to be a detriment and kill you today. I do understand that clearly, and let's make the right informed decisions. But let's understand this as in a bigger picture. In recovery, the whole process is, and I say this as a person from both a professional clinical set, but also as a person who is also a recovering alcoholic from 30 some odd years ago, where I do understand what it's like to have an addiction. I do understand what it's like when you're dealing with a state change. And that's what an addiction does. It changes this. It changes the person. So my question is, for those who are seeking immediately to have cannabis as an alternative, well, why do they still need the state change? Now, part of the argument, as I'm reading from this article here right now that just came out from a medical journal, compares it to what they use for medication-assisted treatment. And those treatments include Suboxone, buprenorphine, which is a very successful treatment model for those who are struggling with opioid addiction, and they need a little bit of a buffer. They need a tool to assist them in early recovery. And we're not going to go into the medical science and the biological science behind that, why that is, at least not right now in detail, but leave it to say that there are changes in brain chemistry that happen after a long period of time of opioid addiction, opioid use and misuse. And these medications do assist the individual in the early stages to get them back on their feet, to get them going, to get them functioning back in society. But the big difference between the medical marijuana model here, where they're talking about using this for recovery, versus buprenorphine or Suboxone or methadone, which is the other alternative that is used primarily for opioid addiction, is that those two medications, the treatment model is not getting the patient high. It's finding therapeutic levels in the body that allow the individual to just not have the cravings and then function normally. So they're not getting high from those products. That's the medical model for it. That is the treatment model for it. I'm not saying this doesn't happen. There's a lot of abuse and everything that we deal with in the treatment industry, but for the purpose of the treatment method, it is so that they don't get high, that they have enough to keep from the craving coming back to them. Cannabis, on the other hand, is a state change, and they're two very different drugs. You're talking about delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, the THC, in cannabis versus, using an opioid, okay? There are two very different methods of how they impact the brain. An opioid works as a relaxant depressant, where cannabis is a hallucinogenic. So there are very different properties. So you're going to replace this with a hallucinogenic, meaning that you're going to create a new state change here and allow that person to function normally. Now, that being said, there are patients right now who benefit from marijuana. They benefit from medical marijuana. There are some programs that show and use this for specific nerve pains and some neuropathic issues that people have, and there has been some success with it. The studies are still working on trying to define this. The unfortunate part is that much of the media hype is really that it's all good and nothing is wrong with it. And that's just simply not true. In fact, what I will ask of you is, if you're interested to learn more about this, you can check out our video. I'll have the link above here, and I'll have the link in the description. And we have a video completely about, there's two parts, part 1 and part 2, called Big Pot. And it's called Up in Smoke. And the idea behind it is to explain really what are the challenges when it comes to cannabis in our world today, and why is it being solicited as this safe, free medication to use, or this tool, this pharmacological change that somebody can put into their body that will assist them in a recovery journey. And again, there's a lot of questions about this in a sense. So with that being said, the difference between, using a Suboxone medication-assisted treatment and cannabis is like comparing apples to asparagus. It just doesn't, they're not even in the same boat whatsoever. They're not even in the same conversation. They're very different methodologies in a sense too. So with that being said, there are patients who are being brought into treatment centers, and they're understanding very clearly that cannabis is an option right off the bat, because there are certain states, such as the state I'm in here in Pennsylvania, that had a health director at one point who said that cannabis is a great treatment for addiction, and that was a very incorrect information to be shared with, and many treatment programs understood differently and knew better, and unfortunately did not act upon that statement, when that was proposed in the state of Pennsylvania. But they're coming into these programs with the understanding that, hey, I can, I'm coming in, I'm having trouble with a drug, I need to give me my medical marijuana card. And sadly, they are easy to get a hold of, very easy to get a hold of. I mean, I can go online right now and get one if it was something I was pursuing, So the challenge is really that the ease of use of it, but there's a lot of misinformation, because I have a patient I just worked with about 4 weeks ago who came out of treatment, was doing very well, started his journey, and he struggled with the idea of not being able to use medical marijuana as part of his treatment. As much of our discussion was about the pros and cons and what are the right things to do. And I really encouraged him, based on his treatment history and where he was at, he really did not need that. And I felt that it would be a deterrent to a long-term recovery for him. And he was adamant that it would be the right thing to do, because all the messages that he has ever heard were about how good it can help me, it'll benefit me. I'm not going to have to worry about feeling like I need something, because I'll have this in my system, I'll be able to function. Well, sadly to say that, within a 4-week time frame, he went back to his previous addiction. And I'm not necessarily going to correlate that the continued use of of marijuana, of cannabis, created that, but it certainly didn't hinder it. And it absolutely, positively kept a state change going on up here in his psychology. So it was very easy for him to have the low guard, the low defense, and then to jump back into a previous addiction. So this is an ongoing conversation, and my takeaway here really is to say that there's a lot of complications in this, and it's not a one way or the other. And I think it's going to be finding out what are the best paths for every individual, because every person is different. This is no cookie cutter issue, and that's the problem with the treatment industry today, is that much of it is cookie cutter. In this sense, we're treating human beings individually. Find out what the need is for that individual, and maybe this is something that can work for an individual, and they can function and be normal, and it'll be and live happily ever after. I personally have not seen that so far today in my, again, 26 plus years as a clinician working in this field. I have not seen where somebody has been able to successfully come over an addiction and start using cannabis, and that they have just been fine and their life has been going, just absolutely perfect. That's not the case. I have not seen it yet. I'm not saying it's not out there. I'm sure, and I'm hoping that people that are watching this video can leave comments below if you yourself have had success on it. I'd love to hear about it, because again, I'm not saying yes or no to this. I really want to just have the conversation. But my concern is that all the information, when I hear about the California Sober, the Cali Sober, you're already inferring that it's okay to say that sober means you can still get high. And that's really what I take away from it. And again, that's my perspective. But again, I would love to hear from individuals sharing your experience. If you have had success using cannabis in recovery, and you've been doing it for a while, let me preface this by saying you've had at least a year or longer in sobriety using cannabis and have had no other issues going on, and you're functioning normal and your life is back on track and everything is going fine with you. I'd love to hear from you, because it's really important that we have this discussion, because again, this can be a tool potentially for some people, but I think that the group of people that this can be potentially good for is very small compared to what is being solicited or told out into the public, where it's a wide variety, like this can help everyone. And that's just not true whatsoever. So if you have the input on this, I would love to hear from you. Please consider leaving a comment underneath. I will pin a comment asking and requesting to hear from you folks as well. I'll also have on that comment, I have a PDF handout that discusses cannabis addiction as well. One of the other challenges in the information is that the industry is pushing out that cannabis is being stated that it's highly addictive. And I hear this all the time. And this is what the industry is stating, that it is not highly addictive. And there's some truth to that. But the problem is they're not going on the other end either. They're just saying it's not highly addictive, inferring, once again, it's not addictive. And that's false. Marijuana is addictive. It is an addictive substance, and it is a problem for many people. So with that being said, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your comments. We are going to be doing quite a few different videos regarding this topic because it's a powerful topic to discuss. We want to see recovery be successful. And in order to have that successful, we have to have the right tools. And again, I say this as a professional clinician, therapist, as well as a program director, and also as a person who's also in recovery from alcoholism from 30 some odd years ago. So I know firsthand what the challenges are when you keep trying to change this in the beginning of your early recovery journey. Okay. And I can share once again, my experience has shown that it has never been successful, at least to date, for my personal experience. So love to hear from you. Looking forward to hearing from you. I will have that video again in the description below. We have a part 1 and part 2 about it. Again, it's called Up in Smoke, and you can learn a lot more about the addiction process, as well as what are some of the benefits of medical marijuana, of cannabis itself too. I go through both spectrums because, again, I'm not having a bias to this. I just want people to be informed so you can make informed decisions. The only thing I will preface very quickly on this is that I absolutely positively am adamant about making this a recommendation for teenagers. If you are a teenager or a woman who is pregnant, either one of those classifications right now, I want to preface this and state this is not something whatsoever that I would recommend, and I think you should even consider, because of the growth of an individual as a teenager growing, and the faculties of their brain and cognitive functioning is still growing, and it has already been proven that cannabis can create challenges and do damage to an individual in their growth, as well as to an infant in a sense too. So again, I'm Bernie from Tiger Resilience, where we offer addiction solutions for family members and friends and the individual struggling with addiction so that they all can reach their human potential. I'll look forward to speaking with you in the next video. And if you found value in this, can you please consider subscribing or at least liking this, and so we can pay this forward to families and other individuals who could benefit from this. Thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedule. I will look forward to speaking with you very soon.